Good morning for those who are also like us in the US, and good evening who are in Europe, and good night who are in Australia and Asia. And welcome to Wed Vibes live session. And I'm extremely grateful to have an amazing guest with us and a great expert, Heather, a founder of 8 Days Week PR company and beyond PR, right? And we're going to talk today about PR and publications, not from the perspective you have to get published in a prominent media, but from the perspective how actually to secure a publication. And Heather will share a lot of insights from the insider perspective, how to catch the editor's attention and stand out, and what to share beyond the pretty pictures, what editors look for beyond the pretty pictures, and how to take advantage of PR from something else beyond real weddings. And with that, before we will dive in, I will ask you guys as a tradition to put in the chat your name, your location, and your profession. Because we always take a pride that we are building international community, and we also want to impress Heather and showcase the international people who join our call. And yeah, so please, as a tradition, your name, your location, and your profession. And also, we always say put chat on fire. If you have any questions, any comments, any ideas, if you agree or disagree, please post it and take maximum of this session, of this 1 hour of the time you spend investing into yourself and learning and trying to get as much insights as possible to get your work featured. All right, with that, I will pass over to Daria, and Daria will impress you guys with an extensive experience and expertise that Heather has and why you have to listen to her. And then, Heather, it's going to be your time to shine.
Yes, yes. Hello, everyone. So happy to see you. And look at this beautiful, beautiful lady. I'm a huge fan of her work. I remember reading Heather's articles at Harper's Bazaar and thinking, "Oh my God, I wanna meet her one day." And right now, the dream has come in reality. So Heather is a wedding, travel, and fashion PR strategist, digital marketing strategist, and editor. She consults and works with some of the biggest names in the industry, the leading planners, photographers, brands you all know and love, including our personal favorites, Bash Place, and of course, Lisa from the Wedding Artist & Co. And she also the founder and CEO of PR agency called 8 Days a Week. And a fun fact, we didn't know that, but after a conversation with Heather, now we know that the name inspired by the iconic Beatles song, which I listened after our conversation. And yes, for creatives, for all of you guys in the chat, what Heather and her team does, they deliver much more than press, and she will talk about this today. They create the purposeful positioning and long-time strategy that keeps your brands moving forward. So excited to see you here today, Heather, and thank you for joining us. And right now, the floor is yours.
That was such a sweet introduction. Hi, everybody. No need to impress. I know you guys are doing lots of amazing work all over the world, and I love how you're bringing professionals together in this way. I'm so honored to be speaking with everyone today because I've had the pleasure of being on the back end. I usually don't do the speaking up front. I work very much behind the scenes. Some of the clients that Daria mentioned have done this live speaker session with you guys already. So I've, been helping behind the scenes, and now I'm going to chat a little bit about this whole publication situation.
Yes, Heather, I will chime in because you empowered actually so many professionals again on the back end of their business. And now it's your time to share your wisdom with our community. Again, thank you.
Oh, it's so sweet. As the girls mentioned, my company is 8 days a week. Again, I have kept this very, very quiet and in the shadows over the last decade, honestly. I founded 8 days a week in 2020 during the pandemic. Before that, I was just a freelancer consultant. had my LLC, Heather Hall Media, I think it was, and then decided, you know what, this actually needs a bit of a brand. It needs a name, but I've up until very, very recently, I haven't promoted it. I'm very proud of the clients that I get to work with, and I know how much they value discrepancy, and all that to say, it's been fun to start putting myself out there a little bit more. And I had some, great conversation with the Wed Vibes team about just what it is that I do. And as far as the agency goes, being inspired by the Beatles song, yes, Daria, the song is 8 Days a Week. It's one of my favorites. I grew up on Penny Lane. My husband's name is Jude. It just felt fitting. And also I tell people I feel like I work 8 days a week in the best way.
Yes.
So a little bit more about me, just that I have been very fortunate to work in this industry for the last 15 years on multiple sides of the spectrum. I started in fashion. I made my way to New York. I found myself as an editor, working my way up to a fashion editor at The Knot magazine back in the day. And then from there, ended up taking more of a PR direction. I went in-house with some big, bridal designer names, started my own thing, started writing for Harper's Bazaar, and have just been very, very inspired by the wedding and events industry, but also very grateful to have been able to be on multiple facets of the various businesses in this industry. So without further ado, beyond the feature, a conversation on positioning, storytelling, and submission strategy. Oh, well, okay.
Yeah. You can see it.
Keyboard did not work. So no secret to anybody, the landscape has changed. I mean, I started as an editor in 2010, and that was the beginning of Pinterest and Instagram through 2012, and having watched how the media landscape, but also submissions for real weddings, how that's grown and evolved is honestly mind blowing. We've all experienced it, and sometimes it can feel a little hard to keep up. I put few bullet points here. What worked 5 years ago doesn't always work now. And what I mean by that is we are in a completely different, excuse me, we're in a completely different era, and everything has to tell a story now. There is so much competition online. Obviously algorithms, AI, there is an oversaturation of content. And so you have to be really, really, really strategic in order to stand out and catch an editor's attention. And I'm going to dive into that much, much more deeply as we move along here. But, I think it's no secret there's not that many editors in the wedding industry these days. I feel like it gets a little bit smaller and smaller, but they are inundated with submissions. And so again, being really strategic as to how you're approaching, how you're formatting your pitch, how you are curating and culling your galleries, it is very much, I'm going to call it an art, not so much a science. I like to think I've got it down to a science, but it's definitely an art. And then I just wanted to make a note that you can't take it personal if your event doesn't get picked up. And there are so many so many submissions that don't. And it's not because they aren't gorgeous or amazing. It's just because maybe the angle wasn't clear, there isn't a story there, or the outlet wasn't the right fit. Again, you've got to be really strategic. Sometimes you really got one shot to get somebody's attention because these things just move really quickly. Any notes on that, team?
Yeah. I just wanted to add from our perspective, absolutely. I just wanted to support Heather's point that yes, and we received so many beautiful submissions, and sometimes it's just we can easily not accept it just because we just published a similar story, like in a similar concept design. So it's definitely if you, and I know how hard it is to like get refused in the publication, but you have to move on to the different medias and like always check first, like if your work aligned with this particular media outlet. Absolutely.
100%. And I'm gonna get, I think I've got that on another slide, but just in case, I have 3 wedding submissions that I'm working on for clients across clients, and they are all stunning in their own way, but even if the design is different, the bride is wearing the same Vivienne Westwood dress. I mean, this Vivienne Westwood dress is just hot right now, and so it is really challenging when you're competing with so many amazing gowns, and there's just multiple facets and levels of custom that has to be taken into consideration. Keep trying to do this with my keyboard.
Yay, you got it.
What's that?
No, I just said you got it. Like yes, yeah. We can see the
I got
second
it to the next slide.
Yeah.
This is the visual that you're seeing here is an example of what I have continued to call a masterclass Vogue submission, and just using this as an example. What editors want, obviously, it's these days it's way more than just pretty pictures. Once upon a time when everyone was just looking to grow their social media followings and was really thinking through what content was going to perform on social, while that is still so important, it doesn't make the same impact that it did once upon a time. Like now, you have got to be able to tell a story. So this particular example, Zoe and Colton, I love this couple. When they got married, this was an Ashley Smith Evans wedding in California. And the couple didn't approach this wedding as I am getting married to get in Vogue. And that really, I think that really resonated with the editors too. There was, beyond just that je ne sais quoi of it having multiple qualities, it just had such a compelling story. There was cultural fusion. The couple's backgrounds were Filipino and Greek, and the amount of detail that I was able to pull out of the bride in terms of she spent a year working with her wedding designer in London on a custom dress. Freshwater pearls from Thailand were flown in. Her great-great-grandfather was a watch designer for Cartier, and her designer pulled in oh my God, my brain is short-circuiting today. Lace pattern and lace work inspired by those Cartier designs. Like there was just such an intricacy to what this wedding actually was and how special it was to them. Not to mention her bridal party was gorgeous, and one of them performs on Broadway. And there again, just so much detail here. And when I pitched this to Vogue, I gave a very, very tight edit of 80 photos is usually all they want to see. And it's one of those things where you have to, I use the word strategic a lot. You have to be very, very pointed with how you approach an editor. Again, this one, they made my job very easy just because there was so much delicious detail, and what I call caviar content for me to be able to pitch. But I think even, the creative team was actually a little bit surprised that Vogue picked it up. Meanwhile, the second I heard Zoe speaking about her wedding and why she chose what she did and some of the, behind the scenes detail, I was like, oh, this is gold. This is so great. And it was picked up very quickly and published very quickly. So very grateful for that. But again, I wanted to dive into, really what editors are looking for, and that's the story. Do they have a unique proposal story for this particular couple? They got engaged in Indonesia with their family on
Mhm.
on a like a family vacation, and so there was just they had a really amazing love story, great proposal. Again, the diversity in terms of people and place and fashion and perspective, there all of these things combined really helped drive the pitch and made it a very easy yes for the editor. Thoughtful styling. Again, that custom element really is key for Vogue specifically. They are looking for they're a fashion first publication. And so fashion is what you've got to lead with if you're pitching to that particular one. And custom is king in that sense.
Heather, and this is pretty much the screenshot of 80 pictures, right?
I mean,
So that's
most of them.
most of
I was
them.
going to
That's
say,
great to see in action. So that is what you submitted.
Yeah. And I love the phrase camera content. I'm going to remember this and use this. And also, I wanted to note that you mentioned that you pulled out some details from the bride. And this is the very important thing that I want to highlight. Sometimes we look at a picture and we don't understand the context behind it. We don't understand the significance of some moments or like some legacy story behind it. And it could be from the couple. It could be sometimes from the creatives, like, oh, something like recently, I remember the story from videographers, and they shared like how they couldn't make it on time, almost couldn't make it, but they overcame everything, the customs, like all the things, and they got there the last moment. And this gives you like this caviar content, the story. And it could be even from the creatives that you will know that potentially go viral on social media, for example.
1000%. I'm such a nerd too for understanding the background from the creative's perspective. That's something I'm very passionate about right now, really understanding like what for instance, and I work with a handful of select wedding and event planners, and I always, they're kind of my first stop on the publication submission train, as in terms of understanding like from your perspective, how was the planning process different from somebody else's? What made this one so special to you or unique? And then from there, beyond that, typically, whether it's my client or another planner, I also, on behalf of the Wedding Artist Co., I'm pitching on behalf of photographers very, very regularly. And also they make my job pretty easy too, in terms of just having really, really amazing content. But again, it's not just about the photos. It's, I have to really, and that's what makes this whole thing, that's how I have a job. That's what makes this whole thing such a process, because, I want to understand from the creative's perspective, what was something that was overcome, like you mentioned, Daria, like, did anything happen that would be worthy of including in a pitch? Obviously, that is subject to case by case. That can really depend. I'm thinking like, thunderstorm scenarios and et cetera.
Yeah. But yes, something that will give you an interesting story. And I see that I think Rebecca just shared the final result, actually, the Vogue feature published, so you can check it out.
Yeah.
Like, knowing like what the Heather.
How it went out.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Thank you, Rebecca. Rebecca is on my team, and she is fabulous. She hails from fashion PR and just has a vast PR knowledge, and I'm so grateful to have her on my team. So she helps me with all of these submissions. Oh, okay. Well, this is where I'm starting to go.
Can I also chime in on the previous one? Because there is a picture in the stories. From our experience also, a lot of artists, they love to share pictures, but they hate sharing the story. It's so hard for them. So can you also highlight the importance of like sharing the description in writing? Because that's a struggle. Like, you guys, this is my gallery, and you guys create a story because you are media, you are editors. But can you just elaborate on that? Because it also really helps and increase the chances of being featured if it's supported by the text.
It absolutely does. And I'm so glad that you said that, because you just communicated the point that I was essentially trying to make in terms of, or what I was getting at, that really is how it has changed. Submissions in the past, again, it was photos first, which, not to say that isn't still the case. The photos still have to align aesthetically with a media brand, whether it's Wed Vibes or The Wed or Vogue or Brides or Over the Moon. Like, aesthetically, it still has to make sense for that particular outlet. But beyond that, the first question I ask is, who's the couple? What do they do? Were there any guests of note? And then from there, I really, as publicists and media strategists on behalf of my clients, I really do all of the investigation myself, so that I can best pitch this and package it appropriately to the right place. And I'm really thoughtful with timing. I've mentioned a couple times how grateful I am that I've had various work experience across the industry, which has allowed me to, I've been on the editor side, I've been on the publicist side, I've been on the sales and marketing side, and I've gotten to know a lot of these editors at these various publications. And I'm grateful to have them, as friends and colleagues, and I have a good idea as to like what they're looking for. But yes, getting the details in writing, especially from the various perspectives, just makes all of the difference. Like I said, I'm such a nerd for really digging into getting my clients to like pull out what made this specific wedding special from their point of view, but then also from the bride, or the couple. They get excited about talking about their wedding, especially if they're interested in potential publication and understanding, what they do, because that also, on the next slide that you got a little sneak peek of, you'll kind of see a very, very high level tree that I created. And it's again, every wedding is different, and there's a lot of nuances that go into play there, but it's going to help you think through where the best fit is. I can't tell you how many pitches I still get as a Harper's Bazaar editor. Unfortunately, I wrote for Bazaar with Carrie Goldberg as the director of weddings and travel for about 4 years. And then in end of 2022, she parted ways with Bazaar. They had a huge internal switch up over there at Hearst, and they opted to not pursue wedding content anymore, which is such a bummer. Shira Savada and I talk about it all the time. We're like, we would have loved to have kept that vertical going in some way, shape, or form. But my point being that I'm hoping they revive it one day. But my point being, I still receive a lot of pitches as a, on behalf of Bazaar, and I get a lot of real wedding pitches. And I don't even, hate to say I don't respond, but it's clear that that particular person, be it the photographer or planner, whomever, has not gone to Harper's Bazaar's website and looked to see that they have not published a wedding since 2022, early 2023. So you've got to do your due diligence before pitching any wedding to really see, like, if whatever outlet you're going for, what have they published most recently? What is it that what is it that they might be looking for that you're providing as a potential content solution, etc. So, and all of that, again, having that couple's perspective in writing just really helps flesh out what that pitch actually is. So with that said, before you submit, do your homework, like I was just mentioning. If you're looking to pitch to Elle or Town and Country or even The Cut, it's worth noting they only publish weddings Elle and Town and Country. Last I spoke with Adrian, wow, sorry guys. they've cut down to only maybe one wedding per month or every other month. The cut really is, you know, I chat with Caitlin often, and the cut really is once a quarter, really. So anyways, you just have to be aware that those particular outlets are going to be very, very competitive. And then as far as your Vogue and Over the Moon and even Brides, they are incredibly backlogged. That's just kind of the nature of where the editorial landscape is at the moment. And so again, understanding that and knowing when you pitch that wedding, what it is that they've been published that they've published recently is going to potentially give you an upper hand. So okay. Again, this is just my fun little my graphic designer, Louisa, who also is fantastic on my team. She helped me put this little tree together that I so thoughtfully tried to write out. I wanted to show how, how you can think through the process. Obviously, fashion being, the creme de la creme, everybody wants Vogue, right? Everyone wants a Vogue feature, be it for the clout or the couple or all of the above. And again, I've said they are a fashion first publication. So that is what they care about. That is what they are looking for. And if you do not have a strong fashion angle, like what else does it have? My example here is it a destination wedding? Back to fashion, I just kind of put a few, like maybe consider Vogue, Elle, Who What Wear, but keep in mind, again, this is all very subjective to each individual event. Of course, this isn't a perfect blueprint, but those publications are they want to know who the couple is. What do they do? Are they in fashion? Elle specifically really likes to feature those that are in the fashion industry. And then I've really enjoyed what Who What Wear is doing in terms of wedding content. And I think they're doing a really great job in terms of translating real weddings as inspiration and making it shoppable. And anyways, they too are going to be looking for, somebody that is either in fashion or has some sort of connection in some way, shape, or form. So that is that piece. Obviously, there are other outlets to consider if there's a fashion angle. Everyone wants a great fashion moment. So these are just high level examples. But is it a destination? I put on here Wed Vibes, The Lane, The Wed, Sea and Traveler. Again, it has to match aesthetically the content that you're looking for. And obviously, team, if there's anything in particular that you guys are looking for, I'd love to have that dialogue in terms of what specifically the type of real weddings you're looking to feature. But again, let's say that's a no. Were you gonna add?
No. I'm agreeing with you.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm just nodding. I'm not.
So beyond that, obviously there's fashion, there's destination, and then the story, which is applicable across all of these things, but maybe it doesn't have the strongest fashion element. Maybe it doesn't have the strongest like destination moment, but it's got a damn good story. Then, again, there's still room to consider the other publications, but, Brides, what did I put here? The Cut, Over the Moon, they are all looking for destination fashion, yes, but really they're looking for Bride specifically viral moments. They really want to be able to stand out against all of their competitors, rightfully so. Over the Moon loves a great like meet cute love story moment. And then of course, Alex has done such a beautiful job curating her site to be very shoppable. So they have They have directory members to consider. They have e-commerce things to consider, a registry to consider. So, if your couple has any ties or any of those things, that's also going to be really helpful to your submission. And again, it's just informing yourself and doing your due diligence in terms of looking at all these publications and seeing what it is that they're publishing. The friend club is another one that I mentioned here. And then lastly, let's say this is, let's say you've got a wedding that you are so proud of, and you know that it's got something. You just can't maybe quite put your finger on what it is. And it could have some high impact on social. Then consider prioritizing SEO and vendor visibility. And again, this can apply to all of these other publications, but I think I think Carrots and Cake is doing a really fabulous job at I hate to use the word resurrecting, but really, really coming into updating their site, updating how they're approaching content. Alex Cott's a great friend of mine, and I think, Cindy and Carl are doing some really cool things over there. And it's not one to sleep on because all of these older blogs actually, because of AI and various searchability and same thing for you guys for Wed Vibes, like, the opportunity for exposure and being able to get pulled up on various searches in ChatGPT or Claude or etc. is huge right now. So making sure that you've got content spread across all of the various outlets is really important. So don't sleep on those. And then lastly, this is where a PR person or PR agency like myself comes in. Shameless plug, I guess you could say. But having somebody that is in regular communication with editors and has a pulse on the trend stories that are being written, whether it's for SEO or something timely like Taylor Swift's engagement, etc. Maybe there's opportunity to pitch a wedding, maybe not for a full real wedding feature, but maybe there's opportunity for a roundup of best engagement photos. Rebecca and I have been working on a lot of those. Taylor Swift predictions we've been pitching out quite a bit on, and then various trends for upcoming seasons, etc. And then also interviews. Again, if you've got a really sick story in terms of how an event came to be or what was overcome, I think Lynn Sell is doing a great job in terms of like showcasing the photographer's perspective. I think there's always other things and ways to consider. And then last but certainly not least, you can always be your own best marketer and roll out on social, which you should be doing anyways. Which does open a little bit of a can of worms in terms of that conversation of pitching versus waiting to push out on social. And it's just this very awkward, delicate dance.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
so let me just chime in to summarize
Yeah.
kind of the criteria to look into. Besides that, it's amazing wedding and you like it, there is a fashion element, right? That's also like the decision-making point. Another is a destination wedding. It's a compelling story, public figure, and what else?
I loved the Heather's like note on the virality, because like let's be honest, like all the media is right now, it's Heather mentioned, it's AI in the play, it's a social media in the play, and we're all looking for those moments that will also attract a new audience for us. So like stay on top of trends and talk about that. It's a different conversation here, of course, about showcasing your personality. But if you showcasing something on your social media, like for example, Manda from Main Call, once Taylor Swift got engaged, she had this viral moment because like she's such a Swiftie fan, and like all of her like friends, let's say photographers, like everyone who works with her, they started reposted her on stories tagging Taylor, and like, Taylor, here's your perfect planner. And we reached out to her personally and we said, Amanda, do you want to write an article for us how you would imagine Taylor's wedding, or how would you predict she will do it? And this could be the story. It's not only about posting publishing weddings, it's also your perspective, your I don't know, expertise, your advices, or jumping on some trends, right? And the more you put it out there, the more the editors will notice, everyone will, or PR agency like Heather can notice, like, and jump, like, create some ideas for you to get published. So
1000%. It's funny in my head, and Rebecca's probably laughing because I know she's on here. I'm like, I should take my own advice on that too. But yes to all of that. And one final note before I move on, because obviously I read through my own deck and I'm like, oh, I should clarify that a little bit more. When I say destination wedding, that doesn't mean, it has to be somewhere far and away. Is it a unique location, right? Is it a venue? I see a lot of weddings, a lot of gorgeous weddings, but they're at a venue that, yes, is gorgeous, but has been seen a million times, be it Blue Hill or, whatever. I hate to call out a specific venue, but that can just be something to keep in mind. And yes, you can definitely be your own marketer in that sense, on social. We've chatted a lot about this already. I tend to get ahead of myself because I get excited talking about all of this, but where to submit and why it matters. I think, again, I'm echoing myself here, but I put match the moment to the platform. So being really thoughtful in, where you're submitting, and that kind of touches back to my point about the venue. This particular wedding, I realize these are such small thumbnails, but I didn't want to, I was going to put two side-by-side pitches. I should have mocked up fake ones, but I didn't want to share too much personal information. So I opted for screenshots this way instead. I apologize, they're small. But this is a Dropbox screenshot of what I pitched to the Lane on behalf of a client. And this particular wedding got picked up very quickly because I noticed, the couple stunning. The fashion wasn't necessarily it wasn't custom per se, but it was very chic. At the time, this Danielle Frankel gown had not been seen too much, but it had this very chic, moody aesthetic that I thought, you know what, I think the Lane might really like this. And I went to the Lane's website. They had very few New York weddings at the time on their site, and I thought, okay, this is at an old bank building in Brooklyn, at a venue called the Whalen, and I thought, let's give the Lane a try, because this would be something more unique for them. And again, it was an aesthetic fit, and there's all these factors that come into play. But it was accepted very quickly and featured very quickly, and it performed really well across their site and on my client social. And again, it was just it was being thoughtful as to where and when this happened and what made sense in that moment for where my A, B, and C submission hit list began.
I just loved here, it's a perfect example of how were able to actually pick up your brain, because yes, honestly, like even from the first look from this thumbnail, I was like, okay, yeah, that's the Lane for sure. But that you went on the website, checked New York destination, like you all connected all the dots. This is what the PR guru actually does.
Yes, I do. Such a nerd for it too, as I've said a couple times. Again, it's for the Lane, this is destination, right? Like for me, it's in New York, but I think, which is where I was living at the time, and my backyard. But for the Lane, this was a a unique destination for them. And again, they really didn't have too many New York weddings, let alone a Brooklyn wedding, let alone at this amazing historic building called the Wayland. So yes, definitely be strategic in that. Editorial reach versus SEO value versus client goals. Those are all things that I take into consideration. You know, it's very easy for all of my clients to want to submit every single wedding, obviously, and that's for multiple reasons because of all of the above. It's either got a very editorial feel, they're very proud of it, or their client really, really wants to at least, at least try for submission. So there's a lot of, again, I've talked about all these factors at play. There's a lot to consider, and that's where I really have to do my, I guess you call it investigation of each event to really pull out what's going to make the most sense. But at the end of the day, I wait for the photos to come back. This is a little bit of a sidebar. I rarely pre-pitch anymore. I used to do a lot more pre-pitching. Obviously, if it's a very high profile celebrity, I'm working in tandem with their PR agency, and we're putting it on the radar of, Alexandra Macon and Liam Hess at Vogue. Like those conversations definitely happen well in advance. But for an average wedding, even influencers, like it really, the pre-pitch really doesn't matter so much anymore. It comes down to getting the photos back and being hyper curated in what it is that you're sharing with the editor. And then this last bullet point here touches on what I've already mentioned previously, in that it is the real weddings aren't the only option, right? You can consider trend features, editorials, commentary, etc. I just realized I'm coming up on our Q&A time. This is probably all. Yep. Just recapping PR. The idea behind PR, I just wanted to mention this, is that it's to support your next client, not just the last wedding. As much as we want to make the couple happy, it's being really thoughtful too. If you are a wedding professional, is this the wedding you want to be, that you want to be putting forward, and that you want to be getting more work similar to? So again, it's just another facet of something to consider when pitching for publication. And then Daria, you already mentioned staying consistent, not just, visible, like promoting yourself on social, etc. Here's just a few of the fun features I've worked on that kind of popped into my mind. And then here's my final slide. But where would you guys like to start with Q&A, since
I have a couple questions. First of all, you mentioned SEO a couple times. Can you elaborate, like, real quick? What do you mean by that? Speaking of the publications, how it can help or be like a decision-making pivotal moment?
That's an excellent question. That is kind of hammered into my brain because as an editor, when working at a media company, and you guys know this too, like that is just something that is constantly being discussed in those editorial circles, in terms of what are people searching for, what are they looking for. Obviously, staying true to that particular media's brand and aesthetic for storytelling, there's also this level of what is it that our particular readers are searching for, and that's where the SEO comes into play. I might be throwing that around a little bit more loosely than I should, but when working for Bazaar, there was an SEO doc that got circulated every month, and those, and these particular stories were what our focus was on. So of course, if any real wedding submissions that came in that, could align with some of those SEO topics, that was another tick on why a wedding might get picked up. not the only reason by any means, but I think, again, I approach all of my, what I do for my clients. Yes, I do PR and I'm a publicist, but I'm also very much a brand strategist, and I consider myself fully a true extension of any of my clients' team. And so
Mhm.
I'm not just thinking about like how to get this one wedding picked up. While, that's a piece of it, I'm also thinking broader spectrum, like how else can, the press of this particular wedding serve their overall business and big picture. And, the submission and getting it featured is a huge part in that. But did that answer your question, actually?
Yeah, that's really great, because even us, we are a media company, right? We need audience, and we have our own priorities, and understanding what kind of content will attract audience, or in the other words, help us to compete, right, for the
Right,
attention.
right.
And the other thing that I'm kind of thinking, that if you work inside the organization, like you mentioned, Harper's, you know what is like SEO priorities. But
Mhm.
if you are outside, it's kind of hard for the wedding professional to know and to guess, all right, am I hitting like carrots and cake as your target or not? So that's helpful, but probably it's hard from for the people from outside to guess.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that is where my insider knowledge comes into play. And I now that we're having that dialogue, I'm trying to think of how I could better support that. But I do think, again, just being mindful of the type of content that each publication is pushing out when you are pitching is the best practice in terms of making sure that you are you're being thoughtful, and that you are, a lot of times I'll reference, when I reach out to an editor, I'll reference a piece that they recently wrote genuinely because I either really liked it, or I was inspired by it, or I have
Mhm.
some additional thoughts to share on it. So just something to consider.
Yeah, that's actually, yeah, being thoughtful.
Mhm.
I see there, there is a person, Panhari. I don't know if
Um,
you pronounce your name right, Panhuri. Like, I see that you want to ask a question. We will give you this chance in a moment. Just couple questions, because I know that I'm kind of representing now a voice of the professionals. That's why I will use this advantage and ask you, Heather. When you say
Please.
the wedding was picked up real quick, what, like, speak, let's talk about timing. What is the fair time? Since you said to wait for reply and for the publication, and then yeah, we will give a chance for the like audience questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, the timing is a touchy subject right now. If any of my editor friends see this, I'm really sorry. I love you. I love you all. Um, e- e- Everyone's just really behind, backlogged for multiple reasons, be it editorial calendars, inundation of content, or a shakeup like Brides had earlier this year in terms of, letting people go and changeover, etc. Um, when I say the wedding got picked up really quickly, that particular one that I shared, the Zoe and Colton wedding, um, I genuinely thought it would take a couple weeks. I kept telling Ashley, "Oh, we got time, we got time." She was traveling so much. And Elise loved it so much. She turned that wedding around within, I mean, from the time I pitched it, it was live within the month, which it, that is a very rare occasion. I just, I must have timed that really, really well. Because I've got weddings that I pitched 2 years ago, that I had a
Mhm.
wedding with Over the Moon that went live on Sunday, that I pitched over 2 years ago. And so
Yeah.
that means if I pitched it 2 years ago, I mean, it's 2.5 years old at this point. And I mean, regardless, we're still, so grateful and psyched that the wedding went live, and that it got picked up and ended up being published. The couple is so happy, but it took a really long time. And I have probably over 10 on my radar right now that are in very similar boats across publications. It's just a bit of a waiting game, so patience is definitely key. I think that's a very broad range that I just gave you, from a month to 2.5 years. That's kind of where it is. Obviously there are other weddings that get picked up and do move more quickly, depending on the story, depending on who the couple is, if they have a big social media following, if there's any sort of like other media tie-in that can be arranged. But as far as, submitting, a lot of these publications have their online portals, like Over the Moon, like Brides, like you guys, like The Wed, like they've got their online submission portal. And you guys might be able to speak to your turnaround time in terms of submission more specifically, but those also really, really range. And at some point you just kind of have to give it your best. We tried, we didn't hear back. Rebecca and I do a lot of follow-ups, but it's definitely a patience game. And that's why I say it's so important to be really strategic, and you're not just, I'm not recommending you just throw a gallery at 10 different editors. You've got to be really strategic, really pointed, because it can take some time. And I think you've got to be really committed to like where you feel the best fit is, and, give it a couple weeks. It can take, any of the editors from across publications. It typically does take them a couple weeks to get back to me on any pitch. Every now and then I will just catch them at just the right moment. But for the most part, it requires a follow-up or two. And usually they're very gracious and say, we're reviewing with the team, we'll get back to you soon. And then it's just a bit of a waiting game. And the whole process can take a long time, because then, you've got, once a wedding is accepted, then you've got the questionnaire that has to be completed. So there's this back and forth with the couple in terms of getting whatever that particular publication's questionnaire is. Once that's created for, a Vogue or an Over the Moon, we're going to wait for a preview link of the photos that they select. And then the couple is then asked to caption each photo. So that takes some time, because, clients are busy. And then from there, we still have to wait for a final preview link. There's a fact-checking process, and then we await publication. So it's just can be a very tedious process.
And when it takes 2.5 years, so the vendors, the photographers and planners, they didn't share this on their socials, right?
They did. I'm not going to sit here and say they
That's
didn't.
great. I'm glad to hear that, because so many artists ask us, like, what can I do? Because I want to share it on my socials. I love this wedding, and they cannot wait, because 2.5 years for a professional, especially if it's a pivotal wedding for them, it's a game changer for the bookings and for growing their business. So that's great that you have still this opportunity to share on your socials while waiting.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think, and that's why I made that face, because I don't just do PR. I help my clients with other facets and consulting on social and overall brand positioning. And so I never want them to miss out on a marketing opportunity, just, waiting 2.5 years for a feature to go live. So it's definitely I like to say case by case. Obviously, when we wait that long, like, content is going to get shared. But I think if the couple is high profile and very visible on social media, that's when you have to really take that into consideration. And
of course, because it's going to be already revealed.
Yeah.
But it's like, most often, in most cases, how we say in marketing, it doesn't happen, right? Most often, in most cases, it's just some couple, great people. All right, let's move to the questions. I see 3 questions. 4. Okay, we are running out of time, but I will try to make sure that we will cover, because you've been waiting. All right, the question is, a planner and Indian designer I designed a legacy reception for a high-profile family, but I missed putting it out in PR and media. Does submitting or creating a case study now and submitting it for PR still make sense, or should I stick to putting it on my socials? This is the question.
I would do both. How, I mean, I guess I said that very loosely in terms of not, I haven't seen anything, but I think, you know, there's always opportunity to, you know, put it out on a, you know, publication's radar if it's something that you feel strongly about that has potential. But again, that's that like delicate balance of, you know, not wasting a strong marketing opportunity for sharing on social. So I think, you know, if you feel Vogue, the ones at the, you know, top of the totem pole, they're the ones that are going to care the most about exclusivity. But you know, a lot of the other publications, it really is just about you know, putting out really gorgeous content and supporting vendors and creative teams. So I think there's opportunity to potentially do both.
Great. Okay, there is another great question from Fatima. I hope I pronounce it right. Is there a time frame for real wedding submissions? How recent should be the wedding to be for the consideration?
Hi, Fatima. Another really good question. The first one that pops into my mind is Over the Moon. They say no more than 9 months. That could have changed, but their cutoff is 9 months. That's really the only publication that pops into my mind that has like a dedicated cutoff that I'm aware of. But I do think being timely and, you know, if you get a preview gallery and the preview gallery is strong enough and you can get a pitch together, I try and go ahead and push that out. But a lot of times, you know, especially when I'm working with a photographer, they really want to have time. They're an artist. They want to have time to really curate the gallery and finish and deliver the full set and give the couple time to digest. So again, it kind of depends on how viral this moment could be. But at the end of the day, like waiting for the full gallery, giving the couple a minute to digest their photos is very, very important. And also communicating them. It's all about communication across the board. There's a lot of moving pieces, and making sure your couple is comfortable with A, submitting, B, what photos are being submitted. So all of that takes time. I think, you know, keeping it within that 6 month mark is kind of a sweet spot. If it can be a little sooner, great, but I wouldn't, you know, once it's been a year, I would move on.
Yeah, all right, that makes sense. Chelsea, I think that Heather already answered your questions in the previous one. There is a great question from Susan and Susan and James. Let's say if it's not a real wedding, right? If I like these guys, they do the perfume, but let's talk if you promote the product. How you like if there is any room for them to submit the wedding, so it's more like an advertisement thing should be discovered.
Meaning that you as that particular creative partner are the one doing the submitting?
Yeah, I mean, I think that James, are you here? Can you just elaborate? You mean you want to?
I can see Susan's
Yeah,
here.
like we have a perfume
James.
and like we're part of
Uh-huh.
like the flat lay and the so like we're part of it, but we're not the photographer or the model or whatever. So like we're in the essence of it and we want to submit and we have part of the story because we're part of the memory and we kind of feel like we want to push it, but we're not what you would normally be the vendor. We're not a flower or a venue or a thing. And we're trying to break into the category. Is that right, Alina? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, sounds great. So yeah, they want to submit a wedding, but their question is about perspective. If you're not the artist who created it.
Thank you.
That's a great question. I think, again, coming from somebody who loves marketing, you're absolutely right in approaching it in that way. That's content for you. You want to share it. It all comes down to communication. You know, obviously you're going to have the sign off from the photographer, and if there's a planner involved, and then the couple, because they own the rights to those photos. So I think the best approach, my advice would be to reconnect with the team, whomever it is, whether it's like through the couple or through reaching out to the photographer, or both, and getting a sense as to if they are interested in submitting, because that could be an opportunity for you to offer to take point on on getting a submission going, especially if that's something that you're willing to do. I think a lot of photographers and couples, they get so busy, and they don't think about it necessarily, and then somebody brings it up and they're like, actually, yeah, I'd love to see this wedding published. What should we do? Where should we publish? So I think just starting the conversation and then being willing to take point on it is very, very helpful, because as you've heard me discuss, it can be a little bit of a lengthy process. Even some of the smaller blogs, like there's a lot of nuances to like uploading a full wedding. So it's you're taking on something, but also I think it's worth it. I think it's worth doing, and again, I think they would probably welcome the help. And if for whatever reason they say no, obviously you kind of got your answer there, but you can still, I would get permission, written permission from the photographer that you're allowed to use them for your own, your own marketing, be it on social, or maybe you're still sharing those, maybe you're still sharing those images for potential trend stories, etc.
Yeah, and I can see here like the similar question from Liz as a content creator, and I think the answer would be the same, like collaborate with photographer and the planner, and you can submit also your work, because as a content creator, the medias, they can publish your work on social, right? The photographers, photos on website, for example, and the content creation on the social media. I think we have time for one more question, and I can see Tara raise her hand. Hello. If you can unmute yourself.
Hi.
Yes, hello.
Sorry, I have a bit of a cold, but quick question. So are submissions only strictly for weddings? Because with Over the Moon, so I'm a luxury event planner, but I do a lot of VIP events with celebrities or like just private clients. We had Over the Moon, we reached out to them in less than a week. They replied us and they wanted to publish, but we are very selective with the weddings we take on, but we do very, very cool events that also sometimes kind of look like weddings. Is that something that, does it have to be a wedding, or is it something that we have to, when we reach out, pitch them like, oh, this could be a bridal shower, but it wasn't, like maybe it was a birthday or that sort of thing. Like, is that something that can be done?
Yes, short answer. I'm curious, did Over the Moon feature one of your events, even though it wasn't a wedding?
No, they featured only the wedding, but it's just like we do many events and we would love to feature them because they're really cool as well.
Yeah.
And they all have stories to tell. But of course, I don't know where to submit those to, because it seems like all the publications just want weddings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also a good question. And that's something that I'm also very passionate about. A lot of my clients do similarly really cool corporate events, milestone events, and it's really tough to get those published. Privacy aside, it's hard because you've got to, it's that storytelling angle, right? I feel like those used to be much easier to get published. So I think like there's definitely opportunity there with more like regional publications, depending on what the event is, depending on who it's for. Is it somebody of note? Like what is the hook? Architecture Digest, Domino, LA Times, New York Times, like there's definitely, I think there's definitely opportunity beyond just the wedding story for publication, but I will say it's much more difficult to secure. And it is very, it's got to be exactly the right fit. So not discouraging you from submitting, but, it is much more difficult.
Yeah, be realistic. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really harder to cut through again, it's about the priorities and the consistency of what media want to post. I mean, we also try to actually incorporate some lifestyle, but again, our essence is weddings.
Right.
So speaking of, again, media priorities.
Yeah.
All right. I have probably the last question, and we have to wrap it up because Heather is so generous. She shared her contacts. If you guys want to reach her out
Yes.
personally about her services and continue conversation, you totally can do. I like the one question, so I will again, as I'm a moderator, I will ask question. There is one. Is it again? We talked about content creators, perfume creators to submit. Is there is any, let's say, preference if the photographer or the planner submit the wedding? Let's say if you can collaborate, or it doesn't matter.
I think it's also a good question. I think it's making more of a difference these days. I am finding, like, for example, if you are a directory member with Over the Moon, they want to hear from you, be it photographer or planner. I think that is there's relationships there that are really important. And do sometimes make more sense in terms of just the hierarchy. Not necessarily. I think the planner is typically the one that manages just because they are the ones that, not to say, for lack of a better word, gatekeep the overall design and story of the couple. They tend to just have all of that information and, organized, and it's easier for them to submit. But at the end of the day, the photographer is the one that is going to have to sign any sort of waiver for rights. Again, depending, if there's no planner, then I think the photographer submitting makes a lot of sense. And then, there are opportunities for the couple themselves to submit if they wanted to, and get really personal with it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And last question, is it good to, like, from Chelsea, I think it's also a great question about the engagement sessions. Because if it's not wedding, we understand. If it's engagement, is there is, like, what is the probability of being noticed for the engagement?
I'm not seeing any. Recently, I will say, brides reached out. They're working on an engagement, like an engagement photo story, and we were able to share some of our fall engagement sessions. But that's the first engagement anything that I've managed to secure placement for in quite a while. I just think people are doing them less. And also, I'm finding that the photographer isn't necessarily doing both the engagement session and wedding like they once did, just because it requires so much more travel. People are booking photographers, be it in their destination or, somewhere else. And yeah, there doesn't seem to be a lot of, there isn't enough of like a fashion element there with those, as there once
It's
was.
not Taylor Swift.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise,
All right.
okay. So I can see the thank yous in the chat, and guys, yes, it's a time for actually to give Heather back some love and thank her
Yes,
to.
Sarah says it has been eye-opening, and yeah, thank you, Heather, for all these insights and every layers that you peeled, and you shared so many insider information, which is really valuable. And I hope that the next thing that you're gonna do in next 72 hours, guys, you will choose the gallery you want to submit and the way you submit. All right. Thanks,
Absolutely. So
everyone.
thank you so much. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you,
Thank you,
Heather.
guys. See you next time live. And Heather, thank you. Have a great rest of your week and your day.
Thanks so much.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Bye.